Hello and welcome back to Theory Hammer, my friends. I am finally getting around to doing an Eldar Tactica. It's been a while, but here we are. So in this episode, we're going to go over what makes the Eldar, Eldar, how their tricks work, how they play, some of their best units, and so on and so forth. And there is a lot to go over here. Eldar have a lot of units, so if I miss anything, let me know down below. And if you guys like these videos, then Eldritch storm the like button, Thunderhammer subscribe, leave a comment, hit Nurgle's bell, and check out our other videos as well. So before we get into this, I do want to let you know that I do have a second channel where I have Let's Plays for 40k games. I'll be doing like podcast type stuff in there and so on, so a link to that channel is likely down below if it's been established. So go like and subscribe. Eldar are about the most annoying faction in the game. They always have been, they probably always will be, and I actually have a pretty decent Eldar army, like a pretty big Eldar army. I have tons of Warp Spiders, Guardians, like lots of Reapers, Prisms, bunch of characters, bunch of different Wraith units, and you know, so on and so forth, and they're just not an army that I like to play very much. I picked them up when Ynnari was good back in 7th edition, you know, as you do, chasing the meta, but they used to be, they used to really rely on like their powers to go off in order to work, and the best of the best even, just like you could hit a psychic phase where everything failed and you just like lost the game. It just happened, and that's just kind of how they were. But otherwise, they've always been an army that hits like really, really hard. They've always had a lot of like movement tricks they could do. They had bikes that could jump, shoot, jump, like back in the day in the assault phase. They could just move 6 inches, so that was pretty good. They also had Death Stars that could just like move across the table in one turn and charge you, that are impossible to kill because of all their psychers, putting all these powers on them. Their tanks have always been really fast, they've always hit really hard, and it's just a fast army overall, and they combine this with really good weapons and very high accuracy. Their main drawback, though, is that they are squishy as hell. The TLDR here is basically be really good at cutting angles and target prioritizing. Eldar and 10th have been just egregiously OP, you know, for like more time than they haven't been at least this far. Now, I think they're in a good spot currently, like where they are, and I still think that they can go all the way, but just not without thinking anymore. So let's explore this a bit more, since they've changed a lot since 10th edition has come out. And if you've watched, if I even have any Eldar videos, they're all outdated at this point, so this one's going to be the one that matters. We first had our fate dice. Those changed. Once we got 12, now we only get 6. But this is okay, because your Farseer can change your fate dice to 6s anyway, once a turn, so like your turn and your opponent's turn, which is dumb. And it's also okay because you still have your Death Jester that can still like auto make dice a 6 with Fate's Messenger. You can generate more of them with Guardians. You can take Eldrad if you really need to, which you probably don't need to, but you have other ways of generating Fate dice, so the fact that you don't generate as many in the beginning of the game really doesn't matter all that much. It does matter, but it doesn't matter all that much because you just take some Guardians and your Farseer's flipping the things that matter to a 6 anyway. Your Death Jester still being cool. All that stuff's still kind of happening. But then we have Phantasm. Phantasm changed. First it changed so you couldn't target, you could only target infantry with it. Then it changed so that you didn't move 6 inches or 7 inches or make a more normal move or whatever the fuck it was, outrageously. It's now a d6 inch move. So it's possible that if you're using something like Wraith Guard and you have them right behind a wall, they're not actually going to be able to move to the other side because their bases are bigger than an inch. So there are some times when Phantasm isn't good anymore, but for the most part, being able to reactive move like that, you know, it's always going to be a really good stratagem to have, and this is okay because you still have crazy amounts of movements, and a lot of things that you have do have a 1-inch base, so it's still pretty good. We also have Night Spinners. These changed a lot. They're like 210 points now, which is crazy, but fuck these things. They're just cancer. The nerf to Indirect was another thing that happened to them, so they only hit on 4s now. You still get your reroll to hit and reroll to wound in the Eldar detachment, but 210 points for this thing. Maybe one of them, honestly, I didn't include this in my list of good units that we'll get to later on, but it's still good because of what it does. Just being able to slow stuff down is outrageous, so anyway, we're not going to go into that anymore. But you also had Wraith Guard. They changed. They went up in points. The way that their reactive shoot worked changed. It didn't move. They used to be able to just shoot willy-nilly at whatever. They didn't have to shoot back at the target that shot them. That's been changed. They now have to shoot back at the target that shot them, and of course only if it's eligible. They also went up in points pretty significantly, but it's still good because you still have the +1 to hit, and you can still have the Spirit Seer, giving guys back, like bringing dudes back into the unit, it's all still very good. They're just a little bit more expensive now, so you don't see them as much. And they are very slow, and since Fantasiam isn't as crazy on them anymore, there's several reasons why they're not seen very much anymore, but as a standalone unit, they're still very good, very good. And then you have the Avatar and the Incarn. They both went up in points, and the Incarn can only be stupid in your turn now instead of both turns. And that's okay, because the Incarn was already stupid, but the Avatar is still absolutely worth his points. And if you haven't seen the Avatar video, I'll try to remember to link it. So that's a lot of the changes that Eldar have had so far. Why don't we go over their army rule and just take a look at it. Their army rule, as I just described, is the Strands of Fate. So if your army faction is Aeldari, to start the battle, make a Strands of Fate roll by rolling 66 if you wish. You can then re-roll all of these dice, but if you do, you roll one less, and you can just continue doing this forever until you have no more dice. When you are satisfied with the result rolled, those remaining dice become your fate dice for the battle. These results cannot be changed or re-rolled further unless a rule specifically states otherwise, like the Farseer. Keep your fate dice to one side, this is your fate dice pool, and then once per phase, before making a dice roll for a model or unit from your army with the Strands of Fate ability. If you have one or more fate dice in your fate dice pool, you can use one of those fate dice to do so. Select one of those fate dice, substitute that dice roll. Jesus Christ. The dice that is being substituted is not rolled. Instead, the value of the selected fate dice is used as if it had been rolled. This counts as an unmodified roll for the purposes of that value and all that and such. Each fate dice can only be used this way once. After using a fate dice, remove it from your fate dice pool and roll all remaining dice that are part of the dice roll, if any. You can use fate dice for any of the following types of dice rolls: advances, battle shock tests, charge rolls, damage rolls, hit, save, wounds. So it's basically miracle dice that you can only use once a phase instead of on every unit once a phase. So interesting little comparison there. So that's your army rule. Your detachment rule is, you actually have a couple of them here, but we're only going to go over the unparalleled foresight. Each time an Aeldari unit from your army is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll one hit roll, and you can reroll one wound roll in resolving those attacks. This is really, really nice with super high damage weapons like Bright Lances and Prism Cannons and things like that, because getting that reroll to hit in the wound, it's going to be better on things that have less shots. It's going to be more reliable on those weapons. It's going to make those weapons hit a lot harder. And it just makes things super reliable when you need them to be, like when you need to get a hit or you need to get a wound, especially on like Overwatch, or you're looking for a dev wound or whatever the case may be. It's just really nice to have that reliability. Alright, let's now go over all of their stratagems, starting with lightning fast reaction. So this is 1 CP, it happens in your opponent's shooting or fight phase. You target an Aeldari unit from your army, that was the target of those attacks, and you subtract 1 from the hit roll. So anything that targets your unit is -1 to hit. It's nice to have. You're going to have a lot of units that will really benefit from something like this, like some of your tanks, the Avatar, things like that. And putting it on the Avatar is especially hilarious when you have that combined with the Farseer's ability to make him -1 to wound, because he's impossible to kill at that point. But then you have Feigned Retreat, another hilarious thing you can put on the Avatar, so that when somebody tries to bog you down with 20 cultists, you can just be like, well, actually, I can just fall back, shoot, and still charge, so I can go charge the thing I care about. So, this is 1 CP, it's a strategic ploy. None of this matters, the strategic ploy, battle tactic, none of that shit matters anymore with the changes to the game, because we've been on this roller coaster for like a year and a quarter, and things have changed so much. I'm getting off topic, but Feigned Retreat is going to allow you to fall back, shoot, and charge. You use it in your movement phase just after an Aeldari unit from your army falls back. Very, very good to have. Matchless Agility is 1 CP. It's not great. It gives you an automatic 6-inch advance. This would have been good before Pariah Nexus in Leviathan, because in Leviathan, things could advance and do actions, and being able to advance 6 inches automatically, sometimes that was 5 points. So that is a pretty good CP, or a pretty good stratagem back then. Nowadays, not so much. I pretty much forget it exists. But Fire and Fade is one that you cannot forget exists, because this is super duper good. This is 2 CP. It should be 2 CP because this is what it does. In your end of your shooting phase, you get to make a normal move with one of your units. This is especially good on things like, I don't know, fire prisms, because all 3 of them can shoot through a single fire prism, and then the one that sees gets to fire and fade back. You could fire and fade with an Avatar just to push him up, just to get closer, get right into the nook of that corner and that terrain that you're trying to get to, or whatever it might be, pressure an area of the board. This is a great stratagem. And it's a testament that only 1 unit from your army, this is an ability that Tau and Eldar used to have on multiple units, that they could all just do this. Not exactly in the shooting phase, but more or less. So The fact that this is a 2 CP strat that only affects a single unit goes to show you how powerful of an ability Fire and Fade is. Being able to move something up, shoot something, and then move it behind cover. It sounds OP because it is. So that's your Fire and Fade. You then have Blade Storm. 1 CP, it's in your shooting phase. You target an Aeldari unit from your army that is not shot until the end of the phase. Each time a model in your unit makes an attack, critical wounds, or AP +2. Also, just another stratagem you're not really going to see very often because it's not very good. It's pretty fucking bad, actually. So, don't use that one. It fucking sucks. Then you have Phantasm. This is good. This is only 1 CP. I don't know if I said it was 2 earlier, but it's only 1 CP. This happens at the end of your opponent's movement phase, so it's kind of like when you would rapid ingress or those kinds of things. You target an Aeldari infantry unit. It used to be anything, dude. You used to be able to use this on a Wraith Knight. So yeah, you get to move your unit D6 inches. It cannot embark within a transport, and if you're within engagement range, you can't use this. So you can't use Heroic Intervention after you use this, which I guess makes sense. Those are your stratagems. They're all nice to have. 4 of them are really good. -1 to hit, fine. You know, that's good on specific units. Feign Retreat, Fallback, Shoot, Charge, awesome. Fire and Fade, every turn you're going to use that, and then Phantasm, probably going to use that every turn as well. So what are their enhancements? We must look at those next. The first one is your Phoenix Gem. This brings your guy back on a 2+. That's all it does. It's really good. It's 35 points. It's really good on the Autarchs, the Way Leaper guys, because they're a lone op, and they're just annoying to get to. You pop this on this guy, he just comes back to life, flies away, it's like, fuck you. So, that's what that does. You got the Weeping Stones, it's 15 points. Each time the bearer's unit destroys an enemy unit, you roll a d6, you add it to your fate dice pool. It's okay. For 15 points, it's definitely worth taking. You know, a lot of the time, when it really comes to building competitive lists, it's hard to find the points to just kind of throw stuff in. You sometimes will have that, but a lot of the times you're like 5 or 10 points removed from something, or you're like 60 points removed from something, and then you're like, well, even if I take these enhancements, I'm still like 40 points down, and so you just end up reworking your list at that point. And so, anyway, this is fine. If you have the points for it, you get to add extra fate dice to your pool if he is destroying stuff. So, it's just kind of a weird one. It's because it's going on like Farseers and stuff like that. So you'd probably want this on a unit of like bikes that can actually put out a ton of damage. That way you can actually destroy units and gain some fate dice that way. But honestly, just take Guardians, put them on objective in your backfield, and there you get a fate dice every turn. So, next one, Reader of the Runes, 20 points. This is an Aeldari Psyker model only, so really this can only go onto Farseers. In your command phase, you can select 1 fate dice, re-roll it, then add it back to your fate dice pool. Not worth it for 20 points. That's the end of that. Fate's Messenger, this is going to go on a Death Jester every turn. You get to change a hit, wound, or saving throw for the bearer to a 6, and because he has dev wounds on his gun, you're then going to be changing it to a 6. He gets to reroll a hit, he gets to reroll a wound, which could then proc a dev wound. Plus he has sustained 3 most likely, so with that reroll hit, you could potentially proc the sustained 3. There's just like the Death Jester with Fate's Messenger is an asshole. Basically, yeah, 90-point asshole. We'll get to him in a little bit, though. So those are all of your enhancements. They're all pretty good. Now, the ones you're most likely going to take is probably just Fate's Messenger, maybe the Phoenix Gem if you feel like you really need it, but I just don't think that you need the Phoenix Gem most of the time. The Autarch, which we will get to very, very shortly here, he's pretty hard to get to, and he's not easy to kill. He's not hard to kill, but he's not easy to kill either. And so let's just roll into the Eldar data sheets, and then we'll go over kind of how the Eldar play, some of their drawbacks, weaknesses, that kind of stuff. We'll kind of get a conclusion at the end there, but first we want to go over their units. And we're going to start this with the Avatar. So, yeah, just go watch the linked video, because this thing is like the best monster in the game, basically. Not exactly. It's probably top 3, tied with top 3, but yeah, this thing is crazy, crazy good. It is toughness 12 with 14 wounds, halves damage, and has a 2-up, 4-up. The Farseer can make it -1 to wound. You can use lightning fast reactions on it for -1 to hit, and it just won't die. Unless you have a ton of dev wounds you can shove it up its ass, it's not gonna die. So the Avatar is a really good unit because it lets you put a lot of pressure on an area in a way where Eldar don't normally have. And yeah, the Avatar is just such an asshole. That's why I did a whole video on him, because he has a lot going on. So the Avatar is definitely going to be one of your best units. He's not always an auto take, just depends on how you're building your army nowadays. Personally, I think that he adds something to the army that you lack otherwise. And because he's just so durable, he really adds an element to your army that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I think that he's worth taking every time. Your Farseer, like I just mentioned, is a great support unit with that -1 to wound ability. He also has the ability to just pick an Eldar unit within 12 inches, changes their fate dice to a 6. It's pretty good when it's near the Avatar, because he makes the Avatar -1 to be wounded, and now the Avatar is overwatching you automatically, and its weapon has sustained D3, and it's like strength 16 with ridiculous amounts of damage and stuff. So yeah, it seems good to me. Also, you can do it in defense if he really needs to pass an invuln to survive another turn. You can just change his fate dice to a 6. Really good stuff there. So the Farseer is 80 points. The Avatar's 335. I don't know if I mentioned that, but the Farseer is 80, so he's pretty damn expensive for just being a toughness 3 foot character with like 4 wounds or whatever. But yeah, considering that he does really good things, he's 80 points. Another character which I actually have a lot of affinity for is Fugan, because he pairs really well with the Avatar. That's not why I like him, but he does pair really well with the Avatar, them just kind of running up the table together. It's like, well, do you shoot at him and kill him? Because he's going to be easier to hide than the Avatar is. But, like, he's great, and let me just tell you why he's great. He's got a dumb weapon. It's Melta 6. It's like strength 14, AP 4, and Melta 6, dude. He has 6 attacks in combat at AP 4 and a flat 3 damage. He has a 5-up Feel No Pain, he's got a 2-up, a 4-up, comes back to life on a 2-up. He has 130 points, but like, he's just so annoying to deal with because he himself is a threatening unit. He's not just like this combat character that you can kind of chump. He's this dude that can overwatch automatically near the Farseer with a strength 14 Melta 6 gun, that if you get into combat with him, he punches you really hard, and then he gets back up and shoots you again with his gun and charges back into combat and smacks you more, while the Avatar's nearby. He's really, really good. Totally worth his 130 points, and just like a beat stick. That's really all he is. I don't think you need to attach him to a unit. Things are easy to hide in this edition because of the way terrain works. He doesn't die to indirect. There's no indirect that deals with this guy. So, yeah, no, you just run him up there. He's pretty fast. I'm pretty sure he moves 7 inches. Kind of doesn't really keep up with the Avatar, per se. But the Avatar's got to move around stuff where Fugan doesn't have to. Our next here is the Death Jester. The lone op 90-point character that just sits in the backfield on top of a building and shoots you from way far away. He gets sustained D3. He's going to take the Fate's Messenger so that he can just dev wound you every turn. And with all these extra shots that he can proc, reroll to hit, reroll to wound, he's probably going to be hitting you with a sustained every turn, so he's going to be getting like 5 hits on you. But either way, this guy's just great to have, because even when he doesn't do an insane amount of damage, he's still consistently doing that dev wound damage every single turn. Alright, and then we actually do come to our Autarch Wayleaper. This guy is 115 points, but as long as he's on the battlefield, he gives you a command point at the start of your command phase. He can take like a melt-a-gun thing, which is nice. He's got decent melee. He's like strength 6 AP 2 damage. He's extremely fast with 14 inches. He's a lone op, but like, who cares? He's just so good for giving you that CP, and he's just got what he needs. He's super fast. He can do secondaries really well. Things like, containment, things like that. He's just really, really nice to have. You don't leave home without this Wayleaper, because the Wayleaper is just that important. I don't think I've seen an Eldar list in 10th edition, like a good Eldar list in 10th edition, that didn't have this guy in there. Because some of your stratagems are 2 CP, you want to make sure that you can always get that extra CP. You don't have to worry about ditching a secondary to get it. You're just always going to have that second command point. You're always going to be able to Phantasm if you need, or you're always going to be able to use Fire and Fade. You're always going to be able to use the stratagems that you need to be able to use because you have the resources coming in. Our next character on the list here is Yvraine. Yvraine's cool. She's 125 points, though. I think she's overcosted, personally, but she has dev wounds on her shooting and her combat. Her shooting, D6 plus 3 attacks that are all anti-infantry 2+, AP 2 for no reason, and dev wounds. So she'll put out about 6 shots, hit with about 5, do about 4 wounds to you, 4 to 5 wounds to you with dev wounds. Against an infantry unit, I'm about that. They're only 1 damage, but still, like, who cares? And then in combat, she has 5 attacks at AP 3, 2 damage, and dev wounds. She brings people back to life, I think in the command phase. So you roll D3, she brings that many guys back to her unit, and she gives her unit a 5-up Feel No Pain. So what I've seen people doing with her is putting her with a Harlequin troop. I think that's probably the best target for her. It's kind of the obvious target because they're good in combat, they're fast, she's good in combat, she's fast, she brings them back to life, that's just the obvious choice there. So she's great. And then what you do is you put the Visarch with them. He gives the unit fight first, and he just attaches with Yvraine. And he just makes the unit really annoying to deal with because it just gets a billion attacks with fights first, and he also has dev wounds and probably precision, and he's also AP4 with 5 attacks. I might have gotten that backward, I don't have him up on screen. He may have precision and then chooses dev wounds, or he has dev wounds and chooses precision. Either way, he gets both of those. He's got 5 attacks at AP4. With like 2 damage apiece, I'm pretty sure there. So that just combined with Yvraine, combined with all the attacks in the unit, the fact that they have a 4-up invuln, 5-up feel no pain, she brings guys back to life. It's a pretty expensive unit, but it's pretty damn good. And the Visarch is also going to be a 90-point addition to that unit, so you're paying 215 points for Yvraine and the Visarch alone, and I believe the Harlequin troop is 180, so we'll just go to that one next. And like I said, there are bigger units. I think you can take units of 12, and they have that 4-up invuln, and they are 180 points, and then when they charge, they give you +1 to wound, so all those weapons that they have on the Visarch and on Yvraine, all +1 to wound. Now they get Lance. Why didn't they just say you get Lance when you charge? Because I didn't write the rules, I guess, but that's what they do. They are also an 8-inch moving unit, so they're just real fast. It's a nice little thing to have with Yvraine, a nice little bodyguard unit for her and the Visarch. They can kind of go into those ruins, right into the corners, be able to bust through the walls the next turn, add an 8-inch move, and then a charge. Always fighting first, so you can't really charge into them. If you're playing behind terrain like that, can't really shoot at them either, so if somebody does have to get to them and charge into them, not only do they have to be able to see you, which you've stopped them from doing because you're in the corner, you also positioned your guys so that you bubbled them out from the wall so they can't actually charge through it, so that they have to go around, which I'll get to a strategy about that in a second. They have to go around, which then makes their charge longer, and then you hit fight first anyway. They get less attacks back on you. There's just a lot of good things to do with units like this. Now, the one thing I'll mention real quick is a side tangent. It's actually better to allow one model to be able to base you in this situation where you're blocking out the wall. If you allow one model to be able to base you, the other models in the unit can't actually get into base of that model, or your guys, and so there's one guy that's attacking you instead of the whole unit. And that works in situations where you can't really bubble the wall out, like they can kind of just go around and get to you anyway. If you let someone come into the wall with one model, that one model has to make base there, and then the other guys have to go like around, and so you have to stay in coherency, and you basically just make it so a lot of guys can't actually fight. So just a little side tangent there. Now, Reapers are nice. They got a nice little glow up. They're only 85 points for a pretty decent shooting unit. They can provide long range cover like all the game. They shoot across the table. Their guns ignore cover. Tempest Launcher does not ignore cover, but it's 2d6 shots with an AP. It's going to be ignoring line of sight. They're hitting on 4s, unfortunately, even though their special rules specifically designed so that they only ever hit on 3s. But you know GW and how they need to change shit because they're bad. So the indirect fire gun that they have, still great. You take 3 units of these guys for 85 points apiece, and you're just shooting 3 Tempest Launchers across the table every turn. That doesn't seem bad to me, plus the fact that when they do get out of cover, each guy gets a strength 8 shot with 2 damage, with ignores cover as well. It doesn't seem bad. And it's AP2, so like they're basically AP3. So nice little unit there. If you don't need it to do anything that turn, if you don't think its firepower is going to be very significant, you can always do a secondary of some kind. It does only move 6 inches though, but either way, Reapers are definitely a unit that are worth taking nowadays in an Eldar army. Before, when Eldar were crazy, these units, I think there were more points as well, but they just had so many other units that were just so much better that these guys didn't have a place. But now they do. And one of the units that is kind of falling out of favor is the Warp Spiders. They're very expensive. They're 125 points, but they are super fast. They can move 24 inches in 1 turn. Each guy has a Dev Wound Flamer. That's nice. That's 5 Dev Wound Flamers, maybe even 6 if you can take an extra one on the Exarch guy. So a bunch of Dev Wound Flamers flying up 24 inches, shooting you. Maybe I Phantasm behind a wall next turn, you can't get back at them. Or you can just move them up 24 inches and they can do some sort of action, because the move that they make is not an assault move. It is like a flicker jump move, and so they can do an action, I believe. I believe actions cannot be done if you are advancing. And since this is not an advanced move, I think you can do it. But either way, they're just very expensive for what they do. And there's just other things that can kind of provide the same role that they do. But one thing that they will do that other units cannot do is they will provide a flamer overwatch that's real fucking good. So, Warp Spiders, still super good for their points. Very, very versatile unit that can do a whole lot of things. And just good weapons. I like things that have good weapons. And while we're on the topic of these Aspect Warriors, let's talk about the Striking Scorpions. These are an Infiltrator unit that's also good in combat. They skirmish really, really well, and they do secondaries really, really well. And, to boot, they're way undercosted. They are 65 points and totally fucking worth it. They have 4 attacks apiece with sustained hits and dev wounds against like non-monsters and vehicles, so they will absolutely beat your combat skirmishers. And the Exarch has 2 wounds, and he's got like a cool power fist thing. They're just, for 65 points, yeah, a scout squad dies to these for sure. And a scout squad is 65 points as well. That's infiltrator with scout, but the scout squad dies to these because the striking scorpions are just going to smack them with their close combat weapons and all those dev wounds. They just get extra damage through and stuff, and they're just pretty good. So, Striking Scorpions, I think this is one of the only Infiltrator units that Eldar have, but the fact that they're an Infiltrator at 65 points with a 3-up save, good combat, how can you not take at least 1 unit of these? Like, you have to take at least 1 Infiltrator's unit at this stage of 10th edition. Like, we know how the game plays at this point, and having Infiltrators in this edition is extremely valuable. So, take those, they're really good. We'll then talk about the Wraith Guard unit real quick that I mentioned earlier. These guys are really good still. They are 380 points, but they're just durable, dude. They're just thick, you know? Toughness 7 with 3 wounds and a 2-up save, and then going into cover. Spirit Singer can bring you guys back. He can give them +1 to hit. They just shoot really hard. They're like Strength 14, AP 4, D6 damage dev wound guns. These guys can still Phantasm, so they're just a real strong unit still. The fact that they went up in points, I think they were 340 before, so you were paying like just about 400 points for a unit with the Spirit Seer. Now they're a little bit more like 450, something like that. They're like 450 or something, so I'm just trying to do it off the top of my head without referencing it, but they're pretty expensive now, so you're talking a quarter of your army practically, and they're not invulnerable. They don't have an invulnerable save. They don't have a Feel No Pain, but if you have a Farseer, now they're -1 to be wounded. They're going to be -1 to be hit because of lightning fast reactions. If you try to shoot at them, they'll just shoot back at you. There's a lot of good things you can do with these still, for sure, but if your opponent has the right kind of firepower, it just won't matter enough for them to survive. At the lower points cost, they were definitely worth it, and the fact that they could shoot at anything, but now they're just competitive instead of overpowered. So, still a great unit. Toughness 7 with a 2-up with 3 wounds. Yeah, 3 damage weapons suck, but, suck against me. But, toughness 7 with 2-up save. It's hard to get through. So, and then -1 to wound potentially, and then that -1 to hit. That can really add up a lot. You're talking 50%, probably more than that, 50% less damage with those 2 things combined. Now, the next unit that we have is going to be our Shadow Specters. They're another good secondary unit, and they're just annoying. They're a bit expensive, as expected for these Eldar units of 5 guys, but they have the move, shoot, move ability, so really overpowered, and they also come with a gun that is flat 3 damage, or a blast type thing that's AP 1, so they're actually pretty good at shooting. They might have stealth. Do they have stealth? They totally have stealth. I forgot about that. So yeah, they also have stealth, so they're a little bit harder to hit as well, which is nice. Only 1 wound, the Exarch has 2 if you take him. This is a little weird unit that's totally going to get legends, so don't buy these, but the Exarch is actually not required in this unit, strangely. But either way, 3 damage flat gun, or just a bunch of blasty guns with a move, shoot, move ability. They move really fast, they're 12-inch move, so they move 12, they shoot you, they move another 6 onto the point, or they move 6 behind a cover, and you just do it again next turn. Annoying shit to deal with, for sure. So that's a really good unit as well. And so are the Swooping Hawks. And they're just great, because they're 85 points, so they're, again, a little expensive for what they do, but they jump on and off the table. When they come down, they can shoot pretty hard. They have a bunch of, Strength 4 guns with a bunch of shots each. They're just a great secondary unit. They're like scouts. They can jump up into the air, and the next turn, deep strike down somewhere else. And unlike scouts have to strategic reserve come on. Swooping Hawks do not. So if you go first, and I pull my Swooping Hawks off turn 1, because of the FAQ, the rules commentary, whatever the fuck document it is, There's a blurb in there when you pull things off the table. If you put them into reserve like this on turn 1, as long as they have a rule that describes how to set them back up on the table, you can put them down turn 1. Deep Strike is a rule that describes how to set them up on the table. So you can bring them on. You might even be able to do it with strategic reserves, but Deep Strike is actually on their datasheet, and so they have a rule on their datasheet that allows them to be placed. It describes how to place them on the table. So I think Scouts can't do that, but let me know down below. This game is stupid and the rules still make sense. So the next one here is our Shroud Runners. These guys are a scout unit. They're scout 9 inches. They're 80 points for 3 of them, so you're paying like 27 points a piece, but they have decent shooting. They're just nice for scouts, and they're also really fast at 14 inches, so they're good for doing secondaries. Like, a lot of these units on this list are going to be good secondary units. This is one of them. They're not super good. I've seen some lists that have run a decent few of these things, and they seem to perform pretty well. So if you guys do use the Shroud Runners, let me know how they do. And the next thing we got here are going to be the Guardian Defenders. So not exactly a secondary unit. This is more just a backfield objective secured type thing going on. It's 100 points, so they're 10 points apiece because you get units of 10. It's just a nice little shooting unit. It's great because they give you a fate dice each turn, though. That's really why you take them. You take them, you put them on your backfield, and now you start the game with 11 dice instead of a 6. So it didn't really change much. Your lists had to change, and you had to add 100 points in so that you could get 5 more fate dice throughout the course of the game. So that's really what they do for you. They give you those 5 extra fate dice, and your Farseer then changes them to a 6, and you laugh at your opponent when your avatar kills them. So the Guardian Defenders are a good unit. You're going to want to take 1 unit of them, especially if you're taking a Farseer, because there's going to be times when you're going to want to keep the Farseer unattached, depending on if your opponent has like indirect or not. Just depends on the matchup, but either you're attaching him to that unit of Guardians or he's just by himself, and it's nice to have a bodyguard unit for him if you need it. Plus, they give you that fate dice, so why wouldn't you take them? We're going to move on to some other units here. So we've been doing a lot of the infantry or the characters. We're now going to do some of the tanks and stuff, starting with the Fire Prism. And this thing is just a fucking asshole. It's 180 points. They shoot super, super hard, and all of them can shoot through just a single one. And then that single one can use fire and fade to get back behind cover. And you can do this every single fucking turn because you have an autarch that gives you an extra CP. So, pretty good. It's strength 8, its gun is strength 18, AP 5, and flat 6 damage. So, it rerolls a hit, and it rerolls a wound. That's its datasheet ability. Plus it's Eldar, so it rerolls a hit, and it rerolls a wound. So it's always hitting and wounding with both of its guns, and it's AP 5 and flat 6 damage, and it shoots 3 times basically because all 3 of them can shoot through it. So you're paying 540 points to have close to untargetable shooting for the first turn or 2. And then after that point, you have to deal with some of the other stuff that gets into your face from the Eldar, like the Avatar and shit like that. So it's not exactly easy to get to these things, but if you can, they're not super durable. They're only 9 toughness. They do have 12 wounds, but only 9 toughness and a 3-up save. So, regular weapons do start actually putting some damage on them. But when you can just fire and fade around, especially when you're in your backfield, these things can move really fast. They're 14-inch move. They're weird looking, so they can like pivot and get extra movement, get extra movement from pivoting and stuff, and get line of sight on things. They're just annoying. So your opponent's never really going to expose these if they can help it. They're probably just going to be in your backfield ruin the whole time, and then one of them's going to be off chilling some other place where it's just fire and fading back behind cover and shooting all 3 of them through it. And then after that, we have our support weapon platforms. These things, I put them on the list because they are still very good. They're 125 points, but they don't leave line of sight. They're an artillery piece. They are great because they have a D-cannon, which will likely hit because your reroll to hit. So yeah, but basically the reason why they're on the list is because the Farseer, again, can make the wound roll a 6 for this thing, and you can just have a dev wound that's from out of line of sight every turn, and it's like D6 plus some amount of damage. So it's not as good as it used to be, admittedly, especially with the points increase, and the changes to dev wounds, the changes to indirect, but the fact that it's still an option, and the fact that it's still an artillery piece that can just be firing from out of line of sight, doing potentially massive amounts of damage every turn, pretty good, and it's on my list because of that. Alright, so next up we got the War Walkers. Warwalkers are 110 points. They take 2 weapons, and so they're pretty nice because they benefit a lot from that Eldar detachment rule, rerolling a hit and rerolling a wound. They're also -1 to be wounded all the time, so that's pretty good. They have 6 wounds and no combat though, but they're still damn good. They also have a scout 9 inches, so people have been running them successfully. I always found that they died too quickly for me, but they are a good unit, just objectively speaking. They're a little bit expensive, but the fact that they have a 4-up invuln and -1 to be wounded, there's just some times when you're just bouncing off of them, and it's just very frustrating because you're shooting like las cannons at them. Okay, well I wound you on 4s now. Okay, well I failed to wound, let me shoot a couple more. Alright, we got a hit. There's your wound finally. Oh, you have a 4-up invuln? You bounced it off? Okay, well I'm out of las cannons to shoot at you at this point. And I shot like 4 of them or 5 of them trying to kill this one damn Warwalker. So that's why it's 110 points. It's just annoying because sometimes on that first las cannon shot, you just fail your invuln and it just dies. It doesn't have enough wounds, in my opinion. It should have like 7 wounds, maybe 8. I would pay 120 points for it if it had 2 extra wounds. But yeah, still a great unit to have for sure. Now, their sister, I'm going to call it the sister, is the Hornet, because I feel like that's a female for some reason. The Hornet is only 100 points. This is not nearly as durable. It does not have an invuln. It's not -1 to wound. It doesn't have scout, but it is way faster. It moves 14 inches. It's got 8 wounds instead of 6, so not -1 to be wounded, but does have that wound cap that I like more. But it also does the grenade strat every time it flies over something. So not literally, but the rule's the same. Every time it flies over something, you roll 6 dice, any 4-ups are a mortal wound. So just a nice little thing to have. It also comes with 2 guns, which are going to be 2 bright lances, so benefits a lot from being Eldar with rerolling a hit, rerolling a wound. So also just an awesome unit to have. And I think that covers pretty much all of the units that I think are very, very competitive in the Eldar army. If I missed any of their other good units, let me know down below. There are definitely other units in this index that are good, but they just didn't make the list. They just have a really deep codex, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. So I feel like I covered the best ones. If I didn't, just let me know down below. But next we're going to talk about some of the things that Eldar are known for, some of their tricks and some of their drawbacks, some of their benefits, and that kind of stuff. Generally, Eldar can kind of just do whatever they want. They've always been that way. They've always had abilities or stratagems or psychic powers that said move across the table and charge turn 1, or fall back, or get to shoot twice, or just whatever. You can just name something. It probably was something Eldar could do at some point. So in this edition, Eldar can do some interesting stuff. Number 1, this is like the funniest thing to me, is being able to overwatch with the Avatar with Fate dice, because its gun is just so hilariously good. It's strength 16, AP 4, and like D6 plus 2 damage. It's got sustained D3. Because you're auto-hitting, you're going to at least get 2 hits with it. It's not like you just can't move near this damn thing, or if you're going to move near it, it's got to be with like a big unit or something that it's not worth overwatching that against. But against like something important, the Avatar is just like, oh, I just magically 10 damage to you in your turn. So that's a really annoying thing to watch out for sure. But like I've said earlier in this video, Fire and Fade on the Fire Prisms, that's something to watch out for, because that's a very common strategy, and it's just so obvious. Like, you have these 3 tanks, they all shoot through the one, and then the one just fire and fades back. It's just like, of course it does. So once you actually play as Eldar, and you kind of get into the habit of, like, or not the habit, but you get into the groove of how they work, you're going to notice, like, some things are like, oh, well, of course you just do this. Like, it's just so silly, and that is one of them. That's very hard to interact with. Eldar in general are an army that are just kind of hard to interact with. Now, our next little tricky guy here is going to be that Death Jester. The fact that he can just, again, not really be interacted with like everything in the Eldar army, just sits on top of the building, which is already like 9 inches tall, so he's already kind of hard to get to because he's a lone op, so you've got to be really fucking close to him to see him. Yeah, he just shoots across the table as long as you're within line of sight. He's putting mortal wounds on stuff, so it's just kind of annoying that you have to deal with him the entire game. It's hard, you know, if he locks down a firing lane and there's objectives in his view, there's not much you can do about it. He's just going to shoot at you, unless you have like the new assassin or something like that. But Death Jester, he's really, really good. He will sometimes do like 4 to 6 mortal wounds to a unit, like pretty consistently, 4 mortal wounds pretty consistently, 2 to 4, sometimes 6 though. And it's just like, dude, this guy is really peppering me, like he's really grinding me down this entire game. Like he's done, what, 20 mortal wounds, 5 turns? If you do 4 a turn, between 2 and 6, he's done 20 fucking mortal wounds throughout the game. Like that's a lot of wounds. That's an entire Space Marine unit of 10 guys. So yeah, he's nice to have. I think he's worth mentioning there. But then you have this fallback shoot and charge with the Feigned Retreat. You just can't lock Eldar down. You can't pile into their units because they're just going to be able to fall back, shoot, and charge you. You try to pile into this fire prism that's been shooting you. It's like, nope. You try to pile into the Avatar. You just charge the Avatar in hopes that you can kind of lock him down for a turn. Nope. He's just going to fly away and just charge something else and just do whatever he wants because that's what Eldar do. And I guess they kind of deserve it, right? And they've been around for a while and they got their asses kicked. So they're kind of in a position where they're allowed to take a little bit of an advantage, right? All right, so I'm just kidding there, but they do generally do whatever they want, and this is a really, really annoying thing to look out for, because when your expectation is that my turn is set up to charge into this thing over here, or to get into this position, because I want to be locked in combats that you can't shoot at me, or whatever the case may be, being able to fall back and then shoot and charge, it's just really, really annoying. Something like your Vrain's unit, you charge into them, they fight you first. Why would you charge into them? I don't know, but you did in this example. They fought first, they did a bunch of damage to you, and now you're like, okay, at least I locked them in combat, and they're not going to charge over here and steal this objective. And then you're like, just kidding. I'm actually going to do that, and I'm going to bring D3 guys back to the unit. I'm then going, which gives me distance. I'm then going to fall back, and I'm going to use the stratagem so I can shoot and charge. I'm going to move 8 inches this way. We're going to charge into that unit that's on the point. Look at that. We rolled a 7. We made it. Cool. Now we're over here. We fight first. We dev wound you. You die. Your turn. Yeah, like being able to fall back, shoot, and charge, very, very good. I use it all the time with Votann. People get into combat with these Votann Terminators. Half the unit dies. The other guys, the 5 that are remaining, fall back. They just kind of decimate a unit, charge into something else, kill that. It's a great ability to have, so it's pretty not surprising that Eldar have this, and you want to use this when it matters, but there's a lot of times when you're not really going to need to use this, but you have it, which is the thing that's important there. And then you have Phantasm. So a lot of these tricks just stem from how the army plays and kind of how the army works in general, but Phantasm is just another thing you can use that throws your opponent off. You can move something in their way, and then just be like, now you can't charge me. You know what I mean? So, like a Warp Spider squad moved up 24 inches. They've kind of created a little bit of a wall. Your opponent's like, cool, I'm going to move kind of closer to them. I'm going to kind of do my thing. I'm going to have to charge this unit that's on this objective. Okay, end of your movement phase. They Phantasm, get in the way of something that was going to otherwise charge. Maybe it doesn't have guns. Maybe you moved out of line of sight and blocked somebody off from charging. It's pretty easy to do that in a lot of scenarios as well. So you have Phantasm. It's just a super duper good ability, and again, it just makes Eldar. It's another reason why they're annoying to interact with, is because they have all these little tricks where it's like I get to do my thing in my turn, and then I get to do something else in your turn, or I get to like hide or something. It's just they have all these ways where they can move into positions where you can't quite get to them, despite the fact that they're real squishy, generally speaking, and they don't take firepower well. The whole point is that they're not taking firepower because they have all these movement tricks. Now, they do have some drawbacks, though. Most of the time, they're just easy to kill, like I said. If they do get mispositioned and your opponent does unleash some firepower on them, they're gonna die. It's just gonna happen. They're not like they were in other editions where they could have impossible Death Stars that you couldn't deal with at all. That shit's gone. Factions are actually pretty well defined nowadays, and Eldar are very well defined in the fact that they hit extremely hard because they roll a hit and a wound. They have really good weapons that benefit a lot from that, and they have the speed and they have the tricks to be able to move around the table and get out of line of sight and all that stuff. So when they do get mispositioned, they just die. They will just get their unit killed. And they are also pretty expensive because they can do a lot of these things, but it just takes that kind of player that's like understands how they work to actually play with them well and not trade poorly for things like 125-point Warp Spiders for like a 65-point Scout Squad. You can't make that trade. You've got to be better than that. And so that's just another drawback that they have, is that their units are very expensive, and so you kind of got to get used to using them and how they... You just got to get used to like using Eldar units. They're just not forgiving to play. If you don't play with them properly, shit will just die, and you'll be like, why are Eldar so good. Like, I don't understand why I suck. And it's because they're just not forgiving. So if you don't play them, and they were especially unforgiving when they had psychic powers that could just fail and your turn would just be over. So they're a little bit more forgiving in this edition. Don't get me started about the beginning of the edition, because that doesn't count. But they're a little bit more forgiving, just generally speaking, in the way that the game works, but they're not forgiving enough where you can just take hordes and hordes of guys and expect to be able to lose a couple of them and still be able to play the game competently. You need to make sure that you're trading well, otherwise you're going to lose. But we do have benefits, while we also have drawbacks. Our benefits are that we're extremely fast, like super duper fast. We can kind of do whatever we want. Like, we have fire and fade, we got phantasm, they got fall back and shoot. They've got reliable damage output. They just have what an army wants to have. So I think that they're in a really, really good spot still. I think they actually require a little bit more skill to play now, because some of their stuff has finally been reined in. But generally speaking, the way that they do play, they're just hard to combat. And really good Eldar players are still winning events with them, like, today. So that's pretty cool to see. It's cool to see that they've gotten nerfed to the point where they're actually not like OP insane, but also cool to see that people haven't totally given up on them. And so, that is the Eldar, my pointy little eared freaks. When you get good with them, which I am not in this edition, but when you get good with them, people want to die. A really good Eldar player will just feel unstoppable. And so I'll leave you with that, my dear scientists. If you guys liked this Tactica into the Eldar, then Wailing Doom the like button, subscribe to Theory Hammer, leave a comment, Thunderhammer Nurgle's bell, check out our second channel, the Power Fisters, link in the description. And with that, my fellow scientists, until the next video, bye bye!